Hello everybody and welcome back to Reprieve Media CIC's coverage of World Radio Day 2019 around peace, dialogue and tolerance. What we've got coming up for you now is an interview taken from the UNESCO website with Ms. Michelle Betz, who is going to talk a bit about radio in conflict situations. Ms. Betz, who has over 25 years of experience as a senior media development and press freedom expert, journalist and journalism educator. Her areas of expertise include media in conflict and post-conflict, military media relations, safety issues and rapid response interventions, and she has a particular interest in the use of media in conflict prevention and resolution. Michelle has worked with journalists and radio stations around the world, including in Rwanda, Ghana, Burundi, Mali and Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Michelle, for being with us today. You had a lot of experience working with radio stations and media professionals in situations of conflict. Based on your experience, what is the impact of media in conflict and post-conflict situations?
The media ultimately play a critical role in ensuring our fundamental human right of access to information, as it's enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Media can really bring people together. It can tear them apart. The best example of the latter is hate radio in Rwanda in 1994. Radio can provide a space where people can get together and discuss and argue and express their comments in a nonviolent manner. I think community is really an effective instrument that can promote grassroots democracy, to air local issues, to provide an alternative source of information to official channels, and to reflect all the diversities that some of these countries and conflicts have within their context. I think media is also really critical in providing important information during times of conflict and post-conflict. Information that will help reunite families, that will help people find food, shelter, safe water, information that can even help to diffuse tension and the chaos that we often find during periods of conflict.
Focusing on, say, post-conflict situations, how can radio bring the communities together to address common issues?
I think the best example that comes to my mind is, again, back in Rwanda, where I had the honor to work on a UNESCO project, actually, back in 2005, setting up a community radio station that was based at the university called Radio Salis. This was one of the very first post-genocide radio stations in the country, and it was going to be set up by the students for their community. And their programming came about as a result of direct interaction with the community. These kids went straight into the community, just walked the streets of the town and talked to people. What do you need? What do you want to hear on the radio? And that's how the programming basically developed. It was a way of even bringing different voices to the radio to talk about issues that affected them 10 years after the genocide. And the radio station is still continuing today, I'm pleased to say.
In your experience working with radio stations in conflict situations, are there any stories that focus on gender equality or inequality?
I think what stands out in my mind with regards to gender equality or inequality is the fact that in many of these cases, women journalists face particular threats in conflict situations. In many of these countries, first of all, women often go against cultural norms and stigmas to go into the profession of journalism. In many conflicts, journalists are subject to human rights abuses, yet women face additional gender-related threats and harassments and violence. We need to do more to support women who are working in radio in conflict situations.
Yes, definitely. So now focusing on radio, amongst other media, what do you think is the distinctive feature of radio in contributing to peace building?
I think the distinctive features of radio are simply that it's accessible. You don't have to be able to read and write to listen to radio. So there's an incredibly high impact that can be had. It's very readily available. You can even now listen to the radio on your mobile phone. It's relatively low cost. I think of a specific project in Nepal, which was actually in post-earthquake Nepal, where community radio stations in these tiny, tiny, tiny little villages were largely doing stories on accountability and holding local officials accountable for post-earthquake reconstruction. Well, what happened is that they were ultimately linking up with other community radio stations across the country, also with the main broadcaster in Kathmandu. And so there were all of these bridges that were built between journalists and between communities. Communities were able to see that, hey, we're not alone here. We're not the only ones that have these issues and these challenges. And if we can all work together, then perhaps we can solve these.
This year's World Radio Day celebrates the theme Radio and Dialogue, Tolerance and Peace. What is your World Radio Day message?
My World Radio Day message is simply to say to all of us, let's use radio to build peace, to promote tolerance, and to learn about each other, because we're all much more alike than we are different.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.